I'm Sharon Fitzpatrick. I'm going to share from a collection of stories called Creature Conversations. It's one of the books that I have available. When I perform as Cher faux hair. So I have for you both fake hair and some gloves. I landscape for a living, so I'd like to cover those a little bit. Let's see here. You have to give me just a moment here to get in a costume, as it were. And, all right, some gloves. And I'm probably going to grab this too. Thanks for having this evening, as usual. Let's see. All right. November 2007, Silent Owl. By late November, the night air in southwest Florida had its own tropical hum. All that breeze enticed me to a Saturday night run. It was too late to invite John to join me, as the 11-year-old had gone to bed hours earlier. Already enjoyed the company of his father, who had returned to amusing himself at the computer. The dog was a rat terrier, her little legs just not meant for miles of running. So it was solo. In the Indian Beach neighborhood, my route was straight to Bayshore, which turned a corner, then bordered homes built along Sarasota Bay. Near the apartment where I started, the road changed names to Bayshore. At the intersection of US 41, it became Dr. Martin Luther King Way. All roads named in his honor, beloved to me. It was a stereotypical road named for Reverend King, a hub of drug activity, and also where churches and charities served the black community in this uber upscale town. The Ringling School of Art and Design was situated almost as a buffer between Newtown, the area of highest black population, and the bayfront properties clustered west of Trail. The demographic in this tiny area was different from the rest of town because of the art students, mixture of races, and even tolerance of gays. This little city in paradise was otherwise rather void of such characteristics, which I valued, although a straight white woman. I performed as a poet in a coffee house used mostly by these art students, and had a couple of boyfriends who had resided in the neighborhood, so the area had its own beat in my heart. For a few well-shaded blocks, I continued straight towards the water and felt suddenly transported to Annapolis. I went there. The sensation was similar to déjà vu, but seemed more a distortion of place than time. It lasted only a moment, 40 seconds perhaps, when I would be spatially aware of the real surroundings, plus some portion of a place dear to me, Santa Fe or Philadelphia, for example. This evening, I reflected on the sensation just as I came to a small clearing where the road bent and began to follow the water. I heard the rustling of another creature near ground under cover, so I ran in place, perchance to glimpse the being also enjoying this fine weather. When I stopped running, it stopped rustling and I giggled. I sensed it had major vocal capacity, but was choosing to keep silent for safety. I shrugged and headed north, choosing to start with a phrase rare in my run repertoire. Ishkala mabud leila, ishkala mabud leila. God is love, lover, and beloved. 33 times. But it was feeling like the right phrase, so I increased to 101, then looked for the next set of words to send through my being. Landed on Salam Shalom Hu, which I usually saved for last, and had another quick transport to Annapolis that I accepted as connected to the urgency to do the Peace Divine Breath chant, silently. So I fell right into it as I continued northward. Salam Shalom Hu. Steadily approaching the Ringling Museum of Art and New College, I realized my lover might be concerned about me if I stayed out too late. He was really a good boyfriend about the matter, as I had some who would have forbidden me such an exercise. Turned around, expecting to change to another phrase while headed south, but the peace vibe was pulling for me to give it equal time in this other direction. Letting this equalization happen while I jogged by homes of great size with gardens commensurate, I returned several times to Annapolis. By the fourth or fifth time I spent some space in that little harbor city, I figured something was happening in the place I had lived a decade prior. There was no panic or terror, just an intense amount of energy around whatever was happening. So I stayed with the salam, shalom, hoo, at a strong pace with both feet and mind. The pace stayed so strong that I wondered about the Naval Academy, which was near a couple of the places that I had sensed specifically. Generally, I was disassociated with these influences, as a certain amount of distance between ego and will allowed for this type of perception. A psychic version of nuclear fission such that energy resulted from the separation of ego and will. I became all the balls in the air instead of the juggler. On the other side of the street was a boardwalk that allowed view of the water and access to the beach. I crossed to the west side of the road at this point, but did not pause. Thought of the creature that had been hiding earlier further down the street and wondered if I might see it. Lowering the volume of the chant in my head and slowing the pace of my feet, I came to the bit of clearing in the bend of Bayshore Road. There was a tuft of brown in the lawn, just a few feet closer to the road than the brush that concealed the creature earlier. I let my mind fall silent and felt ingratiated to the creature for sending me out in whatever was happening with the Annapolis connection. My simple recognition of a being that could not be seen had cued me in to something else that could not be seen in full view yet. In view at the moment, however, an eastern screech owl, a miniature predator with wings, perched among blades of grass nearly its height. It was absolutely still, so I came to rest opposite, my feet and sneakers pointed towards its talons. It was interested in something in the ground, so kept head down. My bending at the waist caused it to look up. Our faces were no more than a foot apart, eye to wide eye. I said to it, aloud, salam, shalom, hu. It received the air moving in its direction on which I had impressed these sounds, but prepared to launch on the first hu, and was directly above my head when I finished releasing the second sound that can be translated as divine breath, or the common call of an owl. This particular screech owl made not a peep in my presence. I told my boyfriend about it as soon as I got into their apartment. I showered and slept, awoke to go worship with other Quakers. Seated silently in a plain room, friends awaited vocal ministry. Among us, an artist and writer who had recently returned to Sarasota Monthly Meeting and often served a message during worship or shared some of her own thoughts and feelings with the spiritual community. She stood and spoke of the peace talks scheduled the next day in Annapolis, Israel, Palestine, USA. Salam, shalom, hu, huh. Thank you.